Welcome to the You Need More Money podcast. I'm your host, Matt Manero, where I come to you from my studio in Dallas, Texas. It's difficult for me to introduce today's guests. He's done so much. He's been instrumental in so many things. He's been called the founder of viral marketing. His venture capital firms have had incredible success for over 40 years. He's perhaps the most famous supporter of Bitcoin and the future of cryptocurrency. He's launched his own university to offer a crash course to entrepreneurs. He's an author, a capitalist, a futurist, and yet, despite all of these successes, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that perhaps his greatest success is that he and his wife have been married for over 36 years, and he's the proud father of 4 amazing children. It is my pleasure to welcome Tim Draper to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. My God, I'm exhausted thinking about
that. But Tim, would you agree that your greatest success is the strength and longevity of your marriage and the amazing 4 children you have?
Oh, definitely. Those kids are fantastic, and our marriage is fun, and we really have a great family. So we lucked out there.
Yeah, we did. I think I'm on that road. I only have 20 years behind me and 3 boys, but I'm on the same path. It's at the end of the day, it's one of the most important paths.
We now have 4 grandchildren. My daughter has 2 sons. My son has 2 daughters, and it's very exciting to watch them grow up.
That's awesome.
And as a grandfather, you're proud of them, whatever they do. As a father, you're always watching, monitoring everything. Are you doing this okay? Everything good? But as a grandfather, it's just like, whatever you do, this is awesome.
That's great. But Tim, as we start today, would you do me a favor and take me back to your childhood in Silicon Valley? This is before you went to Andover, before you went to Stanford, before you got the MBA at Harvard. What was the conversation like at the dinner table? What are your memories of that?
Well, I know we had a lot of different conversations. My dad would always bring up certain issues and then let everybody talk about them. And some of that was political, some of it was battle of the sexes, some of it was, and a lot of it was business. A lot of it was, hey, there's this interesting entrepreneur I've met, or I'm struggling with this guy I met, and I'm feeling like this isn't going the right way. And but when I grew up in the Silicon Valley was a bunch of apricot groves and dirt roads, and we in my hometown there were no fences anywhere, and we'd cut across each other's property, and now there are fences everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that the fences, I remember hearing my mom's friends say, good fences make good neighbors. But I actually feel kind of like I miss the open space between, and I miss the packs of dogs that would kind of all roam the neighborhood. And but it was a very different time and place, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. And I had an amazing mother, an amazing father, and I lucked out.
But
and
two different career paths. Your sister went into acting, and you went into business. So was your father just dropping?
You've done a lot of good research. My sister and her boys, Nat and Alex Wolf, are big, famous movie stars now.
So was your father dropping these topics in an effort to guide you, or just to drop it on the topic and say, you find your own path?
Oh yeah, it was much more of just encouraging us to go in the direction that we wanted to go. Mine was more natural toward business and engineering. My sister, Polly, was clearly an actress from the word go, but she was actually an ace tennis player. But she lost in one match. When she was winning, everything was great. As soon as she lost that one match, that was it for her tennis career. Because she just thought she could win every time, didn't have to even think about it. And then when she when she first performed as Guinevere in the Knights of the Round Table or Camelot, she blew everybody away, and it pretty much took her, and she was in 6th grade or something, and that just took her into the stratosphere, and she was on 30 something, and now she's a real movie maker and producer. She still an actress, but also she writes movies. She got one that she wrote called Stella's Last Weekend, which includes both of her sons. It looks like it's got some real legs to it. So it's great fun. Yeah. Anyway, I'm very proud of her. My other sister, Becky, has been the wind beneath our wings. She's the oldest, and she kind of lets us fly and kind of helps out in other ways.
But you left and you went to high school across the country. And so I have 3 boys, 16, 13, and 12. And I'm trying to just ask the question of what do you remember going on in your mind at that time? Do you remember being confident and happy about it? Or do you remember being disrupted and insecure and self-conscious about that move?
So here's what the situation was. I, in 7th and 8th grade, I was often just out, hanging out with my friends, going and doing after school sports. I was very independent, and I would come back and they'd be mad I was late coming home, and it was a little confusing. And I was kind of, I had the same math class since 5th grade because I advanced super fast when I was in grammar school. And so I was a little bored with school. And my mom had gone to prep school on the East Coast, and she suggested that I go and I look. And when I looked, I thought, yeah, this is for me. This is great because I can really spread my wings here. So no, there was not much lack of confidence. It was a lot more enthusiasm. And there was a part of it I was thinking, oh yeah, it's a little tougher because it was all boys at first, and then it turned co-ed when I was there. Fortunately, just about in time. And it was, I looked at it like just extended summer camp with homework. And by doing it, by thinking about it that way, I thought, yeah, this is great.
But
and my parents were both very supportive, and I did well there.
But you saw achievement at a new level, I'm assuming, right? I mean, that you were surrounded by children and kids who were they had high expectations for themselves, whether they had it for themselves or it was from their parents pushing them on. I mean, that was your first. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was your first big exposure to, wow, this is winning. This is really achieving and reaching levels. Is that fair?
I liked that there were other people who were really into math, and so that was really fun. And I liked that that there was that positive feeling toward education. I thought that was a really good thing. I liked the independence. I liked the freedom I had, and I liked being able to live and die by my own decisions. I thought that was really a powerful thing, and a lot of people get that when they go off to college. Doing it 4 years early, I think, gave me a bit of an edge, and it allowed me to. They flood you with so much homework. It allowed me to sort of focus on the things I really wanted to do, and a lot of that homework was memorization, and I was not so good at memorization. I was much more good at the processing side. And so I felt like that was it was great. And I got to try lots of different sports, and it was really a wonderful experience. So I did, I feel like high school or prep school was a real turning moment in my life. It was a strong turning moment, and it made me realize that it was up to me. It wasn't up to my parents. It was up to me. I had to make it work, and so I did.
A lot of people say that schooling at those levels and then going on to Stanford and Harvard, it's a lot about also who you meet and the relationships that get developed. Would you say that that was a key component, that relationships developed in that span, that 10-year span, still played, or was it just the exploration of who is Tim?
I think the relationships. I would still pick up with those guys immediately if I saw them, but I really, after Andover, hardly saw them at all, and never really thought about it. And so I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure that's exactly what happened. I think really what it was being thrown into a group of people who were into academics, and it helped me kind of focus a little bit more on academics, and it was a good time to do that. And it was also you're thrown in with some people, and they explore together, and they go through that adolescence together, and it's a powerful thing. You really get to know people deep down because you're living with them. It's like you have your family and you know them all very well and deep down, but then you run into this other family and you get a chance to really explore them, and that's a very powerful thing.
So when did this interpretation of the future matter to you, Tim? When did you begin to see
family? My son is right over here.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, this is Adam. I'm doing a podcast. Do you want to say hello?
Hey, Adam. I'm Matt Manero. Nice to meet you.
How's it going?
It's going great. Pleasure to meet you.
Boost.
We are live right now, so you're on.
I have orange pants on for those who are listening and not seeing.
It's okay. I have a red phone booth in here signed by lots of people. Don't worry about it.
It's good.
So Tim, let's get to the futurist aspect of it. I mean, you clearly see the future. When did you know you had a skill set to be able to see not just what's going on now, but really this vision of how it's going to play out? When did that become a superpower?
You know, it was interesting because I never really thought I had any special skills. It was just as certain things started to work. I had a venture business that looked like it was a disaster, and then somehow it started to pick up. I even ran a company that was a disaster, and it never picked up. And I had a couple of those experiences, and then I was able to start thinking out further and further and further, because when you're just starting out, you're just thinking, am I going to have enough, money in my pocket to get myself a burger?
Yeah.
And then later on, you start saying, well, wait a second, well, I've got enough for that. Then what happens a little later? And then what happens a little later? And then I can start thinking. I think it's a luxury to be able to start thinking as a futurist, as somebody who's kind of saying what's going to happen in the future. But then as a venture capitalist, I get to meet people who are all projecting out into the future. And if you meet enough of them, you start to see a pattern that converges on at different times. And you start seeing that, in the next 4 or 5 years, we're gonna, Bitcoin's gonna be everywhere. In the next 7 or 8 years, we're gonna be able to fly on vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. In 10 or 15 years, we're going to have potentially virtualized government. In 25 to 30 years, we're going to be able to have these vehicles that are that go through space and are powered by various methods. So So you just get this sense because you see a certain number of engineers and scientists and figure out where they're headed. And then you kind of get an idea, oh yeah, this is kind of where it's going to go.
Yeah, but your burger example is what is the plight of most entrepreneurs, right? We never get out of this. Where's the next money for burgers and shelter going to come from? And so being a future, seeing the future is really a wasted activity for a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs. We don't have the luxury of necessarily seeing that. Now, I think after 23 years of business, I think I do have that luxury in which I can begin to see what 5 years looks like. By the way, our business, as rudimentary as it is, the financing of truckers for the equipment they drive, gives me a really unique insight into the future, because autonomous trucks are coming. There's no question about it. And so how do we position our business? And what I keep coming back to is, well, look, I don't finance the driver. I finance the company that owns the truck. And so, as long as there are trucks on the road, that's what makes my business.
You should be okay. Yeah.
I should be okay. Whether they're being driven by a human or a robot, it's somewhat irrelevant to us.
No, it's something that, seems, obvious that as an entrepreneur, you're just thinking of how do I get my next meal. But the best entrepreneurs are thinking about that, but they're also saying, what's my 15-year plan, and what does the world look like in 15 years, and how is that going to change what I'm doing now? Because I think the difference between there are great entrepreneurs everywhere, and they all start great businesses, and they're all headed in good directions. But the difference between a great one and an okay one is that the great one is actually taking a kind of a weird sidestep because they're anticipating what the future might be, and they've got a probability in their head that says, this is probably only 50% that this will work, but if it works, I'm a really big deal.
I think I'm interested in Draper University, which is the university you created, and the terminology I read and saw about it is a crash course for entrepreneurs. So I'm assuming we're condensing the timeline in which these lessons and processes need to be done. I should have known about that, because I think I wasted a decade of my 23 years of being in business for myself just really having to make it hard. I didn't have a network of people. I didn't really see the future. I have a wife and 3 boys that I was trying to provide for, and I got very microscopic on what entrepreneurship is. And I think what you just said is really fascinating to me, because we say entrepreneur and it covers too broad of a spectrum. There are very different entrepreneurs. You're saying entrepreneurs who see the future, and a lot of people see entrepreneurs as a small business guy. 2 completely different mindsets.
Oh yeah. In small business is usually, you're thinking, hey, how do I just make sure I'm making money the whole way? And entrepreneur is like, well, I'm going to make this thing happen. I'm going to move society forward. I'm going to create something that no one's ever seen before. And I'm not really even thinking about the money. I'll scrounge something up. And it's a different kind of a feeling. And those are the ones we like to back.
That's the one you resonate with. Yeah, that's the one that resonates with you. I mean, really, in stereotypical descriptions, that's an Elon Musk kind of a thing.
And we often at Draper University, we often do use Elon Musk as a model. He says, we're going to Mars, and then like 95% of the population thinks he's crazy, and then 5% think, and how would we get there? And then 2% are like the best engineers in the world say, I want to go work for that guy because I'm going to help him get to Mars. Mm-hmm. So he attracted all of those great people. The best rocket scientists in the world are certainly working for SpaceX, and the best environmental engineers or whatever are probably working for Tesla. So he's done something like that. What we do at Draper University is you call it crash course. It is a little bit like that. What we're trying to do is, first, everyone comes in with an idea for a business, or maybe 60% of them do. The other 40% don't even have a business. And then we take that business and just say, look, this is not going to take you very far. Most businesses are just sort of like incremental step, nothing really far. So then how do we take that and make it like, what's going to happen in 15 years in the industry you're talking about? What's that going to look like?
Yeah.
Let's go to that and figure out how to get there. You know, you'll find some path to get there, but you just got to keep that in mind, the 15-year thing. And then we take them through all the humiliation, embarrassment, political incorrectness, all the we even have survival training where they have to you've got 24 hours, you got to get up to San Francisco, get a job offer on paper from somebody you've never met, and get back. And then there's another part of survival that's with Navy SEALs and Special Forces and Army Rangers. What we're doing is we're hardening you to when you get out there, what it's going to be like. And if you're doing something that a lot of people think are crazy, you're just going to go forward. You're just going to go ahead and you're not going to be embarrassed. And you're just going to say, look, you're going to all see it in 3 or 4 years, maybe 10. You know, I'm crazy for now, but I'm not going to be crazy in 5 or 10 years. And that's what we look to do. And
that lives in Draper University, Tim?
And we're a 5 or 6 year old university, and we already have one guy who created a unicorn, a billion plus company, which is a new coin, and another woman who created a way to spot cancer in the fallopian tube without damaging the fallopian tube. Mm-hmm. And she just sold her business for $275 million. So this is working. Students 18 to 28 years old are coming to Draper University. They're getting this intense training, and they're coming out and they're doing incredible things. We've had about 1,000 students. They've started about 350 companies. And on average, you know, most schools are saying, hey, we get 80% of our people employed. On average, our students are creating 3 jobs.
So this has to be the spin-off question with that, though, is that should an 18-year-old kid who's not exactly sure what to do, maybe doesn't have the money to go to college, should they forego a traditional collegiate university and just go to Draper University?
I don't know, maybe. I thought college was helpful for me, but I took electrical engineering. I don't know how important ancient Greek is to people's future. It's very important to people's past. And where Stanford, you know, you go and you want to take ancient Greek, they've got a whole group of teachers that teach it and all that. And then, but it took them 5 years to get a Bitcoin class. We had Bitcoin 5 years ago. Yeah. We had plenty of people talking about Bitcoin. And so our students were exposed to that early. Four different companies have been created that are using tokens. And none of that would have happened if they hadn't gone through Draper University. And we're just getting all that information earlier. They have lots of professors that have to be convinced, and it goes on and on and on. Lawyers. We just do it. Hey, this is a really interesting thing. Let's bring in a speaker. So it's been very effective. I think we have, in effect, created heroes as we had intended.
I love it. I want to, before we move to the Bitcoin thing and get closer to wrapping up, I'd like to just talk about something you said, which I just completely agree with, and I've been saying it for a long time. It's really why I got into my business. But you believe that a lot of industries are big and fat and happy and slow and inefficient. And that creates this tremendous opportunity. I believe, look, it's why I got into my industry. I saw that large publicly traded banks were big, fat, and happy. I started my company in '95. And I just, as a young kid, said, I think I can sell, and I think I understand that business. I think I can out-hustle these guys. And I did. There were a lot of business structural things I didn't know, but as far as driving business and stealing share, that actually was very simple. And I believe today, almost 25 years later, it is 10 times easier to find those opportunities today than it was in 95 when I did it. They're everywhere.
Yeah, and you could have, if you had the Bitcoin and the blockchain to work with, you would have just, I mean, you, instead of just taking on this one part of banking, this loaning to trucks, you could have potentially taken on the entire banking system, which is what's going on now.
See, that's what gets you excited, though. See, I was trying to put a burger in my mouth. I mean, I didn't know to even begin. The conversations never entered into my existence getting going. I didn't know that. Today, I say to myself, how do we leverage crypto, whether it's Bitcoin or another version of it, because the banks are going to be in it some capacity. How do we skip over all of that and just say we're going to start loaning for truckers in Nigeria or in Cambodia and just remove the banking system that I know completely from the equation? And I'm forcing myself to spend a lot of time in my organization to think big like that. The problem is I think a lot of people are in lousy businesses that just don't have a chance to scale. And I think I'm in one that actually, look, we get some press lately because of the autonomy of trucks and all of that stuff. It's actually made trucking a little bit sexy in some capacities, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where it was a dog with fleas nobody cared about forever. But now with this, and I'm not sure how much it's actually going to radically transform our economy or even the industry. But it does make for kind of cool, discussion point of the new funky looking Thor or even Tesla's electric truck and all the others. But my challenge to all entrepreneurs listening is there is a requirement where a portion of your day must be spent, and not 6 months. 6 months is already cooked in the recipe, right? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, if we're really looking to move the needle and try to, as my book talks about, the reasoning for you need more money. People need more money. And the way you get it is to think longer term for what is the problem that nobody's solving. Is that fair to say? Did I sum it up okay, or did I miss a number of things?
I think you did. And now I want to read your book, and you've got to read my book. It's called How to Be the Startup Hero.
Yeah.
And what it does is it does take people into that 15-year time frame. It runs through a number of tests. One is the 16-year-old test, which is, are the 16-year-olds really interested in your product? Because they're going to grow with you. That's the first one. Then's the grandmother test. Can you describe it to your grandmother, and will she still understand it? And then the third is the 15-year test, and that is if you believe that this business will still be around in 15 years, then it's worthy of your attention. So same kind of thinking, and but you got to get the food on the table first.
Yeah.
It is a good idea. My dad used to say, put in that extra 10%. And I used to roll my eyes and think, oh, God, really? Do I have to put in 10% more? I'm just barely, surviving at 93%. And he said, put in that extra 10%. It turns out that extra 10% is the whole fun part of business. Yeah. It's the part you can imagine and you can grow with and whatever. No matter where you are, if you're working for a big company, you're working for a little company, you're starting a company, you put in the normal day, but that extra 10% is all the stuff you really wanted to accomplish. And my extra 10% is now, 80% of my day.
Yeah, I love that. Let's get to Bitcoin, because you use, and I'm a very fundamentalist in my examples. By the way, I'd love your take on this. I was just in a meeting with some private equity guys in Los Angeles, meeting with a distributor of an electric commercial truck. And they called me that morning and said, hey, you got to be, the trucking industry, you got to come with me. I said, okay, let's go. It was a 12-hour thing. It was hardcore. And everyone's asking these very, sort of complicated questions and all this sort of stuff. And I'm sitting back saying, boy, why has nobody asked this question yet? And I just let the conversation keep going. And finally, as we're closing the meeting, I said, guys, I just want to ask one question. How many trucks did you sell in the first quarter of 2018? And the guy looked at me and said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I mean, how many did you build and send to a client and get paid for? And he says, well, none. We're not concerned about sales right now. And I remember the look on the private equity guy's face is like, boy, that was a pretty good question. And I'm saying to myself, isn't that the only question? I mean, how, you guys are lucky you brought me on this meeting because I asked that stupid question. You see it differently, right? It gives you an insight of my purely sort of fundamental look at business. But, there's two sides to that. I'd love to get your answer. Was my question right? Or was the guy's question, well, we're not focused on sales. We're a technology company.
Oh, in the case of trucks, your question is probably the best question. In the case of something like a communication system, you'd probably want to give that away for a while so that you'd spread it before then you start figuring out how to make money off of all those customers. But if it's a truck, yeah, you got to sell them, get them off, move those trucks, baby. Get them out.
It was such a simple question. And then I followed up with, well, who's your sales manager? And the guy says, we have the best VP of sales I've ever worked with. I'm like, really? He didn't sell any trucks in the first quarter. How good is this guy? So I don't know whether I need to work away from that fundamental simpleness or I need to work more towards it. I'm still working through that. So I'd love to move to Bitcoin for a second because your stance is in the near future, we're going to go to Starbucks. And the barista, when we pull out cash or we pull out our debit card, the barista is going to look at us like we have three heads and say, we only take crypto. What do you do? We don't even know how to handle what you're offering us for payment.
Right. I think that's going to happen. And it's so funny how quickly we change and we think, oh, that passed. I can't even believe it existed. Like you mentioned the telephone. I mean, we have these things. We have these smartphones. Do you remember the world before your smartphone?
Right.
You had people were stranded on the street without any. They had to get somebody to drive by, say, what can I do for you? And then say, well, hey, go home, call this number. I'll be here for the next 5 hours. Now it's like, I'm in over, boom. The world changes super fast and we hardly notice it. And Moore's Law doubles. Now it's almost every year we get a doubling in the power of computing. But we also get like a doubling every 2 or 3 years in the how efficient we are with energy. We double in so many other ways, and each of those creates new opportunities for entrepreneurs to do something really interesting with the new technology. And now Bitcoin and blockchain are just so big in my mind because they can change enormous industries. They can change all finance, like banking, insurance. They can change real estate. They can change healthcare, and those are all industries that really need it, where they are providing bad service at a high cost. And it can change government too, and I think it will, and that'll be a big surprise.
That's a huge concept. I never hear anyone talking about blockchain in that capacity.
Yeah. Well, because I'm looking at blockchain and AI put together, and what they really do is with Bitcoin, you can create a virtual governance. All the parts of governance that could be virtual can be done now on the blockchain with a smart contract that is safer, more secure, more fair and honest, and incorruptible, and it will provide the same service to everyone. And that can be done for your healthcare insurance, and it can be done for your safety net, your welfare payments, and it can be done for your Social Security or your pension, and probably a million other things that government is supposed to be providing us that can be done virtually, because if you put all that data, like census data and identity data and all that data up into the cloud and put it on the blockchain, it's very secure. And then you can add all sorts of interesting software services to it. There's even the pretty good chance that if we're using just Bitcoin, no dollars, no other, since that Bitcoin's all on this blockchain, which means that it's created a perfect ledger, that all the accounting is already done on the blockchain. And so you don't need a trusted third party there. You don't need the accountant or the outside accountant to check their work. It's already going to be checked. It's already there. And if we're using smart contracts in software, there's going to be much less of a need for lawyers because the contract's there. It's in software. You signed it. It's done. And then in government, you're gonna say, hey, I need, I want to pay into my pension. Well, you're going to pay into your pension, and it's going to be perfectly kept on a perfectly kept record on the blockchain. You just keep paying into your pension, and then when you need it, you're going to get it, and it will have increased in value the way it's supposed to. Right now, the government employees and the politicians are all kind of going, oh, we don't, we really need to provide enough for Social Security, and social. Then all the young people are saying, whoa, Social Security is going to be bankrupt. We got to pay into this thing, and nobody gets it.
Right.
So there is going to be a real flattening of government. I think geographic borders are going to fall in that various governments are going to compete for us. They're going to provide services. So you're going to see the Estonians say, hey, we've got a really good pension program, and the South Koreans say we got this really good, and maybe it'll be a government that gets created from scratch. It may not even have a land based associated that provides a really great service for everyone, and then they go, hey, I want to be a part of that.
I think it's when you're saying it to me and I'm absorbing it, I'm saying to myself, it's when, I used to hate to text, right? Why would I want someone's message to be forever kept? It's one of these things where when you describe it, you say it with such certainty that, everyone texts now. Everyone puts their credit card on the internet. No one is afraid of it today, but for a while there, everyone said it's impossible. It's never going to work. But you describe with that. Simple question on it. How does the tax basis work? Because I look at it in the United States and I say, well, if people are defecting and choosing their own governments, what does the tax base do to ours? And I do hear you with a little bit of capitalism positivity towards it. And what about the people who just aren't interested in capitalism? Where does the social element of this unique new government choice come from?
Well, here's what's going to have to happen. Governments are going to have to compete for us. They're going to have to do a better job with less money, because otherwise another government is going to attract those people, at least at the virtual level. And that's happening all over. China comes down and says Bitcoin's illegal or whatever. And all the Bitcoin entrepreneurs get up and they go, where can we go now? And Japan says Bitcoin's a national currency. And they go, we can go to Japan. So everybody flies into Tokyo and they run their Bitcoin and they run their cryptocurrencies. And all the great entrepreneurs have just left China and they've gone to Japan. There's this sort of competitive governance thing going on. And the more controlling a government, the less likely an entrepreneur or a business or even anyone will want to be there. And so, and the more attractive for business, attractive for good life, attractive for a good safety net, those countries are going to be the ones that attract all the people. And then there's going to be a lot of give and take, and it'll just be like, all the competition for food, or all the competition for all the other great things that happen in the world, computers or cell phones. There's a lot of competition, and so they keep getting better. So I think governments will keep getting better because they'll want to attract us. And we will I think we'll have two forms of government. There will be a virtual one and a terrestrial one. Terrestrial one may still be a monopoly provider, but people will be able to move pretty easily, and they are already.
Yeah.
And they can go from one city to another. If one city is providing really good education, they're going to go to that one. If another one's providing, bad infrastructure or whatever, they're going to leave that one. And that gets into cal3.com, the three Californias that I'm proponent of. If we start 3 states fresh here in California, major opportunity to change and to lead the way in how government will operate in the future and how it will take advantage of new technologies. And those 3 states they'll all be accountable, and they'll be competing for you and me.
Tim, do you have a geographic component to that 3-state breakup of California, or is it irrelevant to you? Does it not matter? Someone who's in Northern Cal can say, now I'd rather be part of Southern Cal.
Oh, yeah. If you live in Northern Cal, you're still a part of that state. When I was working on 6 states, it was a little bit even more ethereal than that. But this is just 3 new states. Mm-hmm. There's one San Francisco across, one LA, and one San Diego and across and up. And they're roughly equivalent in population. They're roughly equivalent in wealth. And so I looked and I said, let's just do this. Let's just separate them this way. It'll be a natural separation. And we'll just allow each of those states to do the best job they can to provide good services to their people.
It's very, very fascinating to me. I absolutely love it. I don't think any of it is being talked about enough. There's no question in my mind that blockchain, and I believe if I recall properly, you said blockchain is bigger than the internet.
Oh yeah, blockchain combined with Bitcoin is bigger than the internet. And Bitcoin, and maybe they'll be competitive to Bitcoin too. Mm-hmm. But putting those two things together and then adding artificial intelligence, this is going to be bigger than the internet. Changed communications and information and gaming and entertainment. It changed some pretty big industries, but the biggest industries are yet to be changed. And they tend to be the ones that are government regulated. So anything government regulated is now open for business. You can do titling on, real estate titling on the blockchain. You can do in healthcare. You can take back all your information and then provide it to any doctor that you want. And all that information, it won't just be your medical records, it will be your genetic history and your blood test results and your Fitbit results and what you ate for breakfast. And that will all be in that one place. And it will be shared with everybody in the world generally, I mean, not specifically, but generally, and all that information is going to provide us much better information. So our doctors can be more like consultants than try to memorize everything in 12 years. There's so much more to do. And they can be more focused on use. So that's another industry. All of these big, huge industries, finishing with the government, which is the biggest industry in the world. I mean, in the US, government spending is 50% of GDP, half of the entire economy, which shouldn't be, because it used to be 8% when we were growing super well, but now it's 50. But it's a huge industry and a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to get creative and figure out, hey, how can I use the blockchain to transform government?
Simple question on blockchain. When does the secrecy veil become removed, and therefore the element of trusting of it occurs to the masses?
Oh, well, what's interesting is there are, I don't know, maybe 10 major exchanges in the world. Coinbase is really the only one who focused on doing know your customer, the KYC stuff. So a lot of people, are pretty anonymous out there. But whenever there is a crime, this is the good news. Whenever there's a crime, maybe they don't catch the guy when he gets his Bitcoin, but they always catch him when he tries to move his Bitcoin. And it turns out you're much better off, if you're a criminal, you're much better off using fiat currency, using dollars and cash than you are using Bitcoin, because if you ever want to spend that Bitcoin, you're going to be busted. So there are two parts of that. One is the KYC, know your customer thing, and that's starting to spread to a few other exchanges. And I think that's going to happen. And then the criminal part is that the U.S. Marshal's Office is catching everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not a good idea to try to, use Bitcoin for any nefarious activity. I think you're better off either doing things straight, or if you have to be a criminal, go do it with cash and fiat.
Tim, as we wrap up here, I mean, this has been a great 45 minutes. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here. I mean, it really helps me understand you, and therefore a lot of the advice and the vision that I think you provided is fascinating to me. I'd like to close on one question, if I may, with you, which is, how does someone develop the skill to be comfortable thinking about the question mark? So many of us are only comfortable when we think about the exclamation point. We know that it has occurred and therefore we can trust it. How do we get comfortable thinking about the question mark?
That comes to schooling. We have our schools, you get an A if you don't make any mistakes. And I think that's a mistake. Our school, we give hero points or rhino coins for students who, for teams of students, we make them all teams, for teams of students who try extraordinary things. Whether they fail or succeed, they get points for trying extraordinary things. So what we are doing at Draper University is sort of the antidote for existing schooling that puts everybody in a box and says, you get an A if you don't make any mistakes. Good job, you didn't make any mistakes. There's some value to that, but it is also forcing people to be in the exclamation point area instead of in the, and I would call it maybe the question mark, but maybe it's more of a statistically valid opportunity. I would look at it and say, this kind of has an 80% chance of being super right in 5 years. You say, well, that's almost a sure thing, and that's something that people would say was an exclamation point. If it's like a 40% chance, but really big in 15 years, that's kind of it's a major question mark, but boy, if it works, it really changes everything.
Yeah.
And being in the venture capital business, I have to be very comfortable with failure, because my investments, about 60% of them fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I encourage my students at Draper University. We have a credo, and it starts with, I will promote freedom at all costs. And then down about 15 lines, it says, I will fail and fail again until I succeed. And I think that's kind of something that people aren't really willing to give up. They aren't willing to fail. They don't want to fail. Nobody really wants to fail, but after Draper University, it's a little bit of a badge of honor.
I know in the early days of my run in this career, I didn't fail enough. I was so afraid to fail. And that cost me a decade of my success, because today everything is about what can I do that could fail. It's all I care about. And I don't know if it's VC mindset, but it's certainly not the fearful mindset that so many small business owners have in America. And I don't think it's global, actually. I think it's more just in America, where we believe that the rung of success has to be systematic. And I think this younger generation is proving to us that many rungs can be skipped. And then that process of grinding and hard work, I hate that word, the grind, that I hear so much on social media. I think it's so silly. It doesn't have to go the way I did it. There are lots of opportunities to leapfrog.
Yeah. And if you're in a big business and you feel like you're just on the grindstone, you're looking at it the wrong way. You're at a big business. What can you do to make that business more successful? You may be 15 rungs down from the CEO, but make sure that your boss and his boss know that there is a better way to do something. And if you can point that out, then all of a sudden, hey, everything starts looking better. I have found that the more ideas I share, the more ideas I get.
Mm-hmm.
And being covetous of ideas is usually not a good idea.
Yeah. Share. Be open. It's okay. It's okay. There's a lot to go around. I absolutely agree with that. Tim, it's been absolutely a wonderful pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be on the You Need More Money podcast. It was just great. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. That was fun.
Thanks.
Good questions.